Welcome back to This Was Supposed to Be Easy, your go-to podcast for connection, joy, and a good dose of laughter.
Hosted by two friends who've seen enough of life to know that it's never as simple as it sounds
or looks.
Each conversation celebrates the diverse journeys we travel, the moments of bravery, the strength we didn't know we had, and the joy we find along the way.
Because let's be honest, life is full of things that were supposed to be easy, but turned out to be harder.
And definitely funnier
than we thought. This is Amy.
And this is Cheryl. And if it were easy, we wouldn't be here. At the end of season 1, as we started preparing for this current season of the podcast, we asked our listeners what topics they were interested in hearing more about. And over and over and over again, we kept hearing about different phases and topics surrounding parenting. And so today we are bringing you one of our I guess I'll call it series regarding parenting as we have a conversation with Shannon.
Yes. So this is Shannon. Now, Shannon is a mom of a 10-year-old daughter. She is newly divorced as of 2023, and she has a TikTok account that she goes into some depth about her history, that type of information with her ex, and you can find her at sayitshay05, and we'll make sure to put that in the show notes so everybody has access. But Shannon's going to talk about kind of all the things that it takes to get into a relationship of co-parenting and what that looks like, from the easy parts to the difficult. All right. Welcome, Shannon.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me. So just to kind of go over like a little bit of what my relationship was like, because that kind of feeds into why I go in some directions with some of the things I'm going to share. So I was married to my ex for around 12 years, and we knew each other for about 18. We actually met overseas. I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and that's how I met him. We worked together at a nonprofit. And then eventually when we got married in 2012, he came over to the US, and then we pursued him getting his citizenship and all of that. But during that journey, there were definitely some ups and downs. There was a lot of secrets that were kept between him, things that he was doing that I wasn't knowing about, and it led into both emotional and financial abuse. And so if you want to know more about that, like Amy said, you're welcome to look at my TikTok. But at the end, when we were separated in 2023, I realized I had been married to a narcissist and a liar for that time period. And I was happy to finally cut ties in 2023, but that meant me trying to figure out, well, what do I do from here? I'm now, even though I had felt like a single mom throughout my marriage, I'm now really a single mom. And at that time, I didn't know, since I caught him in so many lies and things, I didn't know how he was going to react to this. And so I had to start prepping myself in that. And I know everyone reacts differently in crisis, but typically what I do is I go into a mode of, what are the most important things? What do I have to do to safeguard myself, my daughter, and that sort of thing? So I really started talking about and thinking about, what do I need to protect us both? And so after getting the locks changed, that was the first thing.
You really mean protect.
Yeah. I really mean protect. Yes. I needed to think about my assets. I was always the breadwinner in the relationship. I have a, good benefits package, retirement, all of that. Obviously his name was on all of that. So I had to start figuring out, what do I do? So before I even talked with a lawyer, I ended up finding a lawyer that would help me make an estate. I wanted everything secure and him not to be part of that. So that was actually my first step. Then I went to the lawyer. And when I started working with the lawyer, so like I said, I really suggest people to kind of listen to my story, because I literally was legally divorced in 2022, but I found out about the lies and everything in 2023. So even though we were legally divorced at that point, we had gone through basically I filed the the divorce papers and the custody agreement. So then when I found out what was really going on and behind his lies, that's when I was like, no, we got to do this the right way. And at that point, he had already moved to another state. So because he moved to another state, I had the ability to go back and redo our custody agreement. So that's when I really started thinking about, what do I need in this custody agreement to protect my daughter? And so I started like searching on TikToks, listening to people who talk about custody agreements, searching Reddit threads, and just making a list of everything I think I would want to have in that custody agreement to make it as ironclad as possible. And another part of this was also, since my ex was from another country, I had to research that. What
Mhm.
if he took her to that country? What would be the legal ramifications? And he is actually from Jamaica. So even I had to really dig into the law and look at the fact that even though there is an agreement for reciprocity between certain countries, Jamaica and the US don't follow it. They don't, like, if there is somebody who has done something wrong and the US wants them extradited back to the US, they don't cooperate. Jamaica does not cooperate. So that would be the same also with custody. So if she were to go over there, I'd have no legal way to get her back, no matter what the custody agreement said.
Wow.
So, my lawyer wasn't familiar with that. Thankfully, because of some of my background, I had some familiarity and I was able to write that stuff in. So basically, my lawyer and I, we come up with like an ironclad thing. And the one thing I really want to make sure that we're thinking about when you're doing that kind of a custody agreement is to really spell out what you want in it, because you might not get a chance to redo this like I did, and you need to make sure that you're asking for everything. Now, our agreement, when our lawyers met, it went into not a negotiator, a mediator. So our agreement went into mediation. And at that point is when him and his lawyer should have come up and said, we don't like this, we don't like that, whatever. None of that. His concern mainly was with financial, and that was pretty much it.
Wow.
And so at the end of that, I was able to make most of the decisions because he did not disagree with it and he signed off on it. And so some of the things I had to think about is like, okay, my daughter is going to visit him and I'm fine with that. I want them to have a relationship. But there had been times in the past, especially coming from a Caribbean background, you're in a house, you have lots of kids. Sometimes we're sharing beds. No big deal. I didn't want that happening anymore. She needed her own privacy, her own bed. I wanted that safety for her. So I had to make sure that I put that in the agreement. I wasn't the one who chose to move to another state. It was him. So he has to drive the 2 hours to come pick her up, to bring her back for any of the visitation. I wanted it spelled out which holidays we had, because before we had the agreement, he was already trying to mess around with that. And I said, no, not going to do that. The other thing was the agreement to have an app, a parenting app, and that was put in there as well. And that just kind of that leads to another thing is, when you're going through this, you really want to prepare yourself and make those boundaries to really protect your peace. And then that will help you to heal. Like, one of the reasons why I ended up having the app put in is that at the time I was like, even though, like I said, we were officially divorced earlier, our real divorce happened in 2023. So that's when the real feelings came out for me. I was really feeling it. And every time he would call or he would text regarding my daughter, it was so triggering for me. And I needed to be able to still be there as a parent for my daughter and speak with them, because he had not done anything that would negate him being able to have time with my daughter. So I had to like figure out a way to, I'm still going to talk with you. I still needed to have those discussions with him about medical things and school things and extracurriculars and visitation information. But I needed it to be in a safe spot, because before when he'd call or text, it'd be like just what he was doing before when we were quote unquote together. And so I had a hard time in my brain separating that. I'd see his name come up and I'd be like, oh, wow, now I have to think of him in a whole different way. So the app was really helpful because all that communication goes through that app. All you get is a notification saying there's a message on the app and you know what it's about. And you go in there when you have time to read it. And that's what I did.
So I've never, I guess maybe I've never been in a situation where I needed to know that something like a parenting app existed.
Yeah.
And so when you first said that, my mind went to a way to see where she was when she was with him.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're saying is that's the space that holds the communication. And
Yes.
so that makes me very curious, but it also makes my mind jump back to when you said that you had a lawyer, but you still had to do a lot of research.
Mm.
You mentioned TikTok, you mentioned Reddit, but you also made it obvious that you had knowledge about the cultural context that your lawyer didn't have. And I just want to make sure that there's an extra, maybe a little spotlight shown on that because, when you get a lawyer and you're paying all this money, you have this faith that they know what they're doing. And they do know what they're doing, but there are, it sounds like, so many additional pieces that they maybe don't think about. And you have to be willing to advocate even with your lawyer to bring in more pieces, more information, more knowledge that you have to the arrangement.
Yeah, that's 100%. And what you as a parent might think of as drastic and needs to stop doesn't mean the court will see that way.
Mhm.
And I will tell you one aspect of that. So in the Caribbean culture in Jamaica, unfortunately, corporal punishment is still often used. It wasn't until all this was going down in 2023 that I found out during one of my daughter's visits to Jamaica with him that a family member of his had used a belt on her. And I was shocked, especially when this had happened a couple years before.
Mhm.
I was shocked because she tried to tell my ex at the time and he wouldn't believe her. When she came home to speak with me, she told me a little bit of the story, but not all of it, because I think she was still trying to figure out what was going on and also thought, I've told daddy and he's done nothing. So it was very, after finding that out and also finding out the fact that my daughter was staying with some of his, romantic friends, you could say, in Jamaica without me knowing. I was like, "I don't know what's going on down there, and I have no way of controlling that." I can't control what happens in another country legally, and those visitations were or him taking her to Jamaica for visiting was because I wanted her to know the culture. I wanted her to see her family, but I didn't go because we were always not at a financial ability to do that. And that's part of the reason why I say that, we had some financial abuse that took place as well. And so that's why I had to think of it in that aspect because my lawyer did not have experience with that. He did not have experience with the legal aspect of that too, because there is a legal doctrine between different countries. Right now, the name of it is escaping me, but
Okay.
that it goes from no, like, for instance, if someone has done crime and they want to extradite them to all the way to these kind of situations where you're sharing custody with someone, and that
Mhm.
law kind of speaks to all of that.
So I detracted you, but I think it started with that parenting app, and you're sort of opening up that world to at least me of tools that are out there to help you co-parent and, as you worded it, help you protect your boundaries.
Yeah, and so the parenting app is good for that, but it also documents everything everyone says, so if you ever have to take them back to court, it's there. And I will tell you, prior to us having that, there were times where we were not very nice to each other via via text. And so that app has helped tremendously.
Even
Um,
hold you accountable, it sounds like you're saying.
Yes, it holds everyone accountable. Now, I've read where some people it doesn't stop them, but for me, I don't wanna go back to court. It was too expensive. I don't wanna do it again, and therefore, I will be nice. So,
Sure.
we that's where I upload any receipts that he's responsible for paying half. That's
Ah,
where we put in any information about, maybe, weekends of visitation that he wants to visit her, or maybe I also use it to put in like some activities my daughter's involved in so he knows not to plan visitation on those weekends or whatever. So that's been very helpful. The interesting caveat with that is, and so now I'm kind of jumping ahead a little, but since we've used that and since I started that boundary with him, recently my daughter had some medical things go on and she was hospitalized for a period of days. And so it got to the point where we had to talk a lot, and putting it in an app and then waiting for the message to pop up and going into that and responding got to be too much. So finally I just said to him, let's just text. Let's just normal text. And I was surprised. We texted, yeah, our normal texting, issue, or our normal texting thing, and there was no issues with that. There was even times where I called him to talk with him. During part of it, he actually came to the hospital and was there when I was there, and all of a sudden, I realized I don't have any more emotional attachment to him.
mm,
And I think it was because I did these things at the beginning to make those boundaries.
mm,
Another thing that I also was very clear about is what we agreed upon in the agreement in our custody was going to happen. So last Thanksgiving, he had her, and there was a relative visiting. And the next thing I know, my daughter's calling me saying she's going to be sharing a room with the relative in a bed. And it was told to my daughter, what happens at daddy's house does mommy doesn't need to know. But my daughter differently than that. So I had to have a conversation with him, and I gave him some options. I'm like, either find somewhere else for her to sleep, or this or that, and he's like, I'll take care of it. She called me back 2 hours later, happy as a clam, saying, oh yeah, mommy, I've got my own bed in my own room, everything's fine. She had a great week. But one of the ways I sold it to him, because of dealing with a narcissist, is, she's been waiting so long to see you and have this time with you. And I know you have too. So right now she wants to come home, and I really don't want to have to drive there to pick her up. So let's see if we can find a mutual way for us to get this to work so she can have time with you this week.
mhm.
And it worked. So I think, co-parenting also means you have to pick your boundaries. Not sleeping with someone was a huge boundary issue for my daughter and for myself. Me saying to him, could she sleep on airbed or on the couch? Now that doesn't go with the agreement, but at least she's not sharing a bed with someone. But I gave him that option. And so he ended up just telling the person to sleep in a different room or whatever, and that worked out fine. But when they break a boundary, you gotta be on them,
Yeah.
especially when you're in a high conflict parenting, co-parenting situation. There's a lady that I follow on TikTok. She's at Ugly Truth of Co-parenting. Instead of calling it co-parenting, she calls it parallel parenting, where you're working with the person in parallel. So you might not always agree to everything, but you're trying to find what works for your child, and what one way they might do it and one way you might do it might be different, but is it the best thing for the child? And you can't be always picking a fight. Like another thing I was watching, when I heard TikToks a few weeks ago, and she was talking about like things like her kids now are in like middle school and high school. So you got the homecoming dance and
Mm,
prom. And so she's like, I'm not going to argue with that person and my ex about that. So when it comes to the prom dress and the corsage and the dinner, I'm giving them the money for that. I'm not going to do the halvesies or school pictures. I'm ordering the school pictures. And I'm going to, so like in my own situation, I order school pictures for myself. I send him a link. It's on him if he wants to do that. Parent teacher conference, same way. I tell him it's coming up. Here's the link if you want to talk to her teachers. I'm not his secretary anymore. I'm not going to control it. That's why we have the parenting app. So I stay in communication with him on what I need, but I'm not going to handhold him through parenting.
Is the parenting app called the parenting app, or is there a name for it?
There's different ones, but the one we use is Our Family Wizard.
Okay.
And it was recommended by the lawyer, and it was actually written into our custody agreement to use it. Yeah. Now there is a fee for it, a yearly fee. It's 150 or less. It's either 130 or 150 per person, but I 100% think it's worth it because you have
Mhm.
that documentation.
Yeah.
You were mentioning that like there's a delay between like the communication. What happens in that delay?
Yeah, so you send it and then the My Parenting or I think it's Our Parenting Wizard. Yeah, I can get to you guys. I can tell you the name
We'll
of
put
the
it in the show notes.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so what happens is that you send something and then it sends like a notification saying there's been an update in the app or there's a message waiting for you. And it's just like any other notification you get from any other apps on your phone. So that's where the delay is. But when you're dealing with a medical situation like I was dealing with my daughter, that delay can be a lot, especially when doctors were coming in telling us information. I was trying to communicate it to him in real time. Plus, my mom as well. So you're like,
Right.
okay, I can't deal with these app notifications right now. But the one growing thing that I thought was really good, like I think back on when all this started, and I don't think my ex thought I was going to pursue things this way. I don't think he thought I was going to get a lawyer. I think he thought I was just going to sit down and boohoo. And he knew me for 18 years, but he really didn't know me because that's not what I am like. You cross me, I am going to fight, especially when it comes
Right.
to my daughter. And so one thing that I felt was really good is that after my daughter's medical stuff started slowing down, he actually said to me, "Do you want to go back to using the app or can we just text?" And I thought about that. Part of me was like, we could just text. I'm fine. But then I thought, if I say that now,
Mhm.
what's going to happen next year? Or what happens if something else? So I said, no, let's continue using the app.
Wisdom.
Yes, yes, exactly. Wisdom, yes. The other thing I also would like to kind of talk about in that same realm about not giving an inch is I don't know what it's like for every state. I live in Georgia. My ex lives in South Carolina. So when we had to go back and redo our custody agreement, they considered that settled privately. So my lawyer kept saying to me, "You're going to get a notification from the state about collecting of the child support." Now, I do have it garnished because that's what I asked for because we did the second time around. Typically, you don't start with garnishment unless they don't pay. So, like I said, when I knew we were redoing this and he moved, so that gave us the right to bring the custody agreement back out, I told my lawyer, put in garnishment.
Mhm.
If he challenges it, we'll go there, but I'd rather ask for everything and take back than forget to ask for something. And I now, like I said, we've had the custody agreement for a little over a year, and I would really have to stop and think if there's anything that I wish I would have put in it. So far, I can't really think of anything.
Wow.
Yeah. So with that garnishment, like I was saying, I contacted the state of Georgia and they said to me, "Oh, when you handle it privately like that, we don't get any information. So we're not collecting." So his work was sending me it like they were supposed to. But what I was concerned about is if he changed jobs and I don't know about it, how is that collection happening? So when I talked to the state, they said, well, ma'am, we can collect it if you want, and we can also enforce it. And I said, well, how much does that cost? And they said, well, it's a $25 application. And then after that, nothing. And I said, well, sign me up.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it took some time. It took, I would say, roughly 2 months, maybe 3 months to get everything set because there's, of course, paperwork that you have to do. And then, it's a government run function. So there's some time. But once it was set, they now garnish his wages. So it always comes into my account. They don't garnish for some of the stuff we pay 50-50 for. So medical things, have to rely on him paying me. But everything with that was agreed upon for child support, the monthly amount is garnished from those wages. If the state increases it for cost of living, that's automatically done with what I'm collecting. But the thing that I was most concerned about was enforcement. And since he was in another state, I wondered how that happened, and they will enforce it. And enforcement is not to be taken lightly. That can mean if you're not paying, your driver's license can be taken away, your passport can be taken away. If
Mm.
it went for a period of time, you could even be deported. Like, it is a serious thing. And from what I've been told, Georgia and South Carolina take it seriously. And thankfully, so far, my ex is taking it seriously because he has not missed a payment. Prior to that prior to that, there were a lot of payments being missed and things not getting paid for, and that was part of it. I knew his history. I knew if we did this, I wouldn't get his payment, and even though I'm an independent woman and I make my own money, he helped make this child, and we should equally be paying for it, especially when I have her with me almost 90% of the time. I have a lot of friends who have settled, got their custody agreement done, and they don't wanna take that next step for the enforcement, and I hear them complaining about, "He's not paying me," or this, that, or he's, and I'm like, "Why don't you just go through the state? Like, it's $25. I'll help you with the paperwork." And
Right.
they still don't wanna go through it, and I'm like, I feel like with this whole thing, I was like, "I didn't cause this. This is not something I did, and my daughter deserves to be treated well. I deserve to be in a parallel parenting situation that doesn't make me wanna pull my hair out." And so I came on strong at the beginning so that now here we are a year later, I've had a hospital situation with my daughter, and I was able to work with my ex beautifully
Mhm.
without the headaches. And I think if I had given him an inch or not done things previously, would we be in that same boat?
Yeah, yeah, it's the boundaries right up front have
Mm,
saved you so much conflict. I assume
exactly.
saved you so much
Yeah,
conflict. Yeah.
100%, because now, like I said, if I see his name come up, that, we're talking about my daughter, we're not talking about us. We're past that. I don't care. I'm not interested in going back to him. I don't care if he's interested to go back to me. We're only focused on my daughter. And this plays into, I think, and actually, I was speaking with Amy a little bit about this when we were talking prior. I come from a family of divorced parents too, and the relationship was not good. I mean, to this day. My ex and I, we had because we got married overseas. So then when we came back to where I live now, we had a little celebration with family and friends. My dad came, my mom came. They sat on different sides of the place where we were having our reception. Half my friends went to one side, half went to the other, and then they'd switch. So, yeah, and this has been 20 some years, and I'm like, I don't have time for that
Yeah.
negativity. I mean,
Yeah.
no, do I wanna sit down and have a conversation with him? No, but I would like to try to see, or have my daughter see, as safe or as conflict-free of a parenting situation as possible, because unfortunately, she did not see one while we were going through the divorce. There were things that were brought up that she has had to learn about at the ripe old age of 10, and that she shouldn't have had to have found out about. And so now I'm like, we need all of us need to be in a conflict-free situation as much as we can, and just work for the goal of having some sanity for my daughter. And that's another thing I think I would bring up too is my ex originally, he wanted this to be a secret. He didn't want our daughter to know. And even though he was not at the house very often, which again, go to my whole story or that, I'm like,
Yeah, I will say as somebody who has listened to the story, it's worth a listen. There's a it gets a little crazy at times. So if some of the things that you're listening to now are saying like that doesn't quite make sense, listen to the story. It does, but it is definitely a different type of situation for the reason for the divorce.
yes, and after you hear that and you hear what I've been saying about our relationship with the medical situation, you'll be like, How did that get from there to there?" So,
Yeah.
I have a very good counselor. So, but no, he did not want her to know about it, and I was like, "I'm not gonna lie to her." Now, did I explain everything to her in a way that was, I guess, uncouth or whatever? No, I tried to explain to her what was going on in the best way I could that a 10-year-old would understand
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
And that's what you need to do because, my counselor has talked to me a lot about, the balance of what you say around your kids. Like, you want to be truthful, and it's a fine line to walk, especially because my ex, I would consider to be a narcissist and a gaslighter. And even during this hospital stay, I saw him gaslight my daughter about something. And I'm like, now I have to explain that in a way that he basically at one point just left for part of the day when we were in the hospital to go spend time with one of his lady friends, as I like to call them. And and then wanted to know why my daughter was upset that he left. And so those are the things that you're like, make this make sense. Why do you think she's in the hospital? We at that point we didn't even know what was wrong with her, and you're leaving for a number of hours. So my daughter has had to come to the realization that, daddy says things, and some things we just have to be like, okay, that's just daddy. Or like if he says he's going to come to pick me up in an hour and it ends up being 3 hours. Okay, well, that's, we just continue to live our life. And so, unfortunately, she's kind of getting that education now, which hopefully will help her stay away from the narcissist when she decides to
But
date.
but you're doing it in a way that doesn't close the door for
Yes.
her to have that relationship that you value.
Yes. I've had to do this before. I think I may have mentioned I had unfortunately, a very bad working situation a number of years ago. And I remember my counselor saying at the time, you got to stop looking at this person as if they're your boss and expecting what a normal boss would give you. And I think going through that situation, because it was very close to when I started going through this with my ex, that situation at my work was traumatic, very traumatic. It devastated my mental health for a good period of time. And then I followed up with then having the situation with my ex. And I think it readied me for that because I didn't have that mental health, plummet as I did with the boss situation. But I've also had to come at it with him in the same light. You can't make them parent to your level, and you just can't. You can hope they do, but why give your energy into making them do it? So if you have these boundaries and you do these things that you need to do, at least I think part of it, and I could be wrong, is that I'm not feeding on his narcissism, so he's not getting what he wants. So what's the use of making my life miserable? She's not complaining to me on what I do, when I show up, what I say to my daughter. I'm not getting that feedback or energy from that. So I might as well just comply. And I could be wrong.
Mhm,
That might not
mhm.
be what he's thinking of, but that's how I like to look at it at least.
Yeah. And she at the same time, she's also learning some skills to protect herself as she grows older, right? To recognize, hopefully, to
Yes.
recognize behaviors in others. And what a balance. What a balance you are finding.
Yeah, and you don't my counselor has also made it very apparent that I need to, like I said, watch what I say about him, especially, silly disparaging things, because you don't want her to then start resenting you. She might
Mhm.
not show it now, but that might come back. I have a preteen. So when those teenage hormones are raging, who knows? And
Yeah.
I want to have a good relationship with her, and I want her to have a good relationship with her dad. So I will do as much as I can to give that to her or give that opportunity to them, but I cannot control it unless it involves something safety wise that
Yeah.
could be detrimental to my daughter.
So, you obviously have done a lot of work to get to where you are today. The Shannon that started this journey was in a different place. So, if somebody's listening and let's say they're at this journey or,
Mhm.
kind of at the beginning of this journey, what might you suggest to them? Like, I know you've mentioned a counselor, obviously, you've mentioned a lawyer, you've mentioned, reading things, listening to things, but where could they go to start the process? Or where might be a good place for them to start doing the work on themselves to hopefully get to a place where that parallel parenting or any of that kind of thing?
Well, that's the reason why I had to go to a counselor, a lawyer, and search people up on TikTok and Reddit. I've unfortunately have either seen divorce situations where there's no kids involved or there's kids involved and it's turned into chaos. And one of the reasons why I shared my TikTok story, there's a few reasons, is because when I started going through this, I was like, there's nobody out there talking about this. And I felt embarrassed. Oh my gosh, especially after you listen to my story. You're like, how did you fall for that, lady? know? And I think that's when I was like, you know what? I got to share my story. I've got to talk about it because talking is healing and it might help others. And I've had people reach out to me saying, I had a similar story or oh my gosh, I can understand. So I think talking about it helps, but I also think the other thing that helped is I had strong people around me. I had friends, I had family, people who I thought would judge me. Like, can you imagine? You've been married to someone for a period of time. Now you're legally divorced. And a year and a half later is when you finally start telling people I'm legally divorced. The first person I told was my counselor. And then after I told my counselor, I ended up stopped seeing her because of some other issues related to that. And now I see her and it was just I was scared. But then can you imagine calling up your mom and being like, "Mom, I've actually been divorced and now I'm really getting divorced. Can you help me through this?"
Right.
And
Right.
my dad or Amy, you and your husband, you've known me forever. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's response is, "What? What?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can imagine it was hard in my situation, but even if, let's say, you don't have that secretness in that situation, but you are all of a sudden divorced and you're the people that everyone thinks, oh, they've been a great couple and everything. I think you need to figure out who your allies are. Who are the people you can lean on? Who can help you think clearly? I did lots of walking. Lots
Okay.
of walking to clear my head. I unfortunately, like I shared, I had gone through a very traumatic situation with work about a year before. So I leaned on what did I do then? At that point, I started doing my flower beds and just thinking through what do I need to do? I need to be focused on my steps and what I need to get done to survive so I can get to the next day or get to the next thing. Like that first year, it was okay, I need to get to getting that estate planned. Okay, got that done. Now I got to figure out which lawyer. Okay, now I got to figure out how to get my agreement and make sure I have everything in it as possible. And it was just step after step after step. And then finally, about a year later, because I actually had to take my ex to small claims court too for some money he owed. And so after I was done with all this lawyer stuff, I was like, what do I do now?
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so like you kind of live by survival, but you have those people there that are boosting you up and rooting you on and saying you've got this and not judging.
Mm.
And that I was very, very blessed with. Even, there were people that I thought would really judge me. No, I was lucky because I didn't get that.
I really appreciate you sharing. I mean, beyond the legal, right?
Mhm.
Beyond all of those steps and learning that you engaged in, the fact that you also found what you needed in walking, in movement, in the earth, in gardening and being in nature, and also in connection with other people. Like that might not be in someone's list of to-dos, and
Yeah.
but so essential to your own well-being.
Oh, yes. I built a patio out back thanks to this divorce.
I built a patio in trauma response to finishing my doctorate degree.
There you go, there you go. Yeah, it was an area that he had clogged up with a bunch of junk. It was an eyesore, and so last March, I started just cleaning the area, and then over the summer, I started building the patio. My dad came down, he helped me, and it was so cathartic, and now I have this beautiful patio. It was, it was good, and now since then, like I shared, I know this is about co-parenting, but I did have a lot of financial abuse in my marriage. And so now I've been taking a lot of steps to harness that. Your podcast about finances, where Jeremy was there, was super mind blowing and helpful. But since then, I have done things around my house, made upgrades to keep the value of my home, everything I possibly can to keep myself financially afloat and hopefully have something for my daughter so that when if she decides to marry or not, decides to buy a house or not, she will have some money to do that and not have to worry or entertain someone else for helping her do those things so she can be her own person. And yeah, and so I've also had to share with her about like credit card debt because of this, or whose name to put on different things because of this. So I've been
Mhm.
trying to share with her areas where I needed to maybe do a little more improving so that maybe when she gets in those situations, she'll think back and be like, Mom did this or Mom said this. Maybe I shouldn't do XYZ.
And that's what we want for our children, right? We
Yes.
want them to know a little more,
Hmm.
have the knowledge that we're able to offer through experience, conversation, all the things so that their life can be well.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the goal.
So is there anything else as we're wrapping up here? Is there anything else that you want our listeners to know?
Just to hang in there and take it day by day. My counselor says to me a lot, don't eat the elephant, take it one scoop at a time. And when you have these traumatic things, that's what you gotta do. It will be hard because you think, "Oh my gosh, I'm never gonna eat this entire elephant," but you will if you keep strong, you hold your boundaries. Another thing she's always told me is to take care of yourself, have some me time because this is a very draining thing to go through. You do those things and hopefully you will come out on the other end with yourself in a safe place physically and mentally and your children.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing with us and
You're welcome.
opening your journey up to others to learn from.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to This Was Supposed to Be Easy. Remember, the best stories are the ones we live.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the conversation going because life may not be easy, but listening in should be.
Stay curious, stay connected, and keep wondering.